All right. Thank you so much for being here, Sam Bahour. It's an honor to host you. Thank you for joining us live from the West Bank. And thank you, Karina, for arranging this discussion with Sam. And we are very grateful. And so, Sam, over to you.
Thank you very much, Saman, for organizing it, and Karina for nice to meet you again after you came and visited in Ramallah. So I'm happy to meet you all. I'm going to jump right in, and I have a few slides. Actually, I can give this slide in 24 hours, or I can give it in 6 hours, or I can give it in 10-15 minutes, and that's what I'll do today, the 10-15 minute version, because I understood we'd like to have a conversation at the end. So if I can switch over to my slides, everybody see the slides? Or
Yes,
the
the
slides
slide
view?
is
Okay.
already visible from before. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So I start my presentation with the Sea of Gaza. It's an economic presentation, but the Sea of Gaza is key given its our access to the outside world. And if you look at this picture, you would imagine what's behind it is a landmass which is thriving. Of course, we know better. That's the landmass that was 6 months into the genocide. It's much worse now. And we need to remember those Gazans who are outside of Gaza looking in. This is a friend of mine who went to do her PhD in Canada, and she's watching her home be destroyed as her family is being killed. We can imagine what kind of toll it takes, not only on the people in Gaza, but out of Gaza as well. This is Rafah before, Rafah after. Just the magnitude of what has happened is mind-boggling. We cannot grasp it. I don't have to go through these slides of where we are because this audience knows the bigger picture. What I will do is stop here and show that this Israeli finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, one of the most fascist people in the Israeli setup, and that's a very high bar. And they have produced these plans to annex 82% of the West Bank. And the way they're talking about it publicly is to annex before announcing the annexation. And they have a very clear plan that the Palestinians will be locked into these green areas and the dark brown areas will be part of Israel in the future. In the meantime, they're building new settlements. They just announced 34 new ones last week, 13 of them to be built on private land. And if we're talking about economy, the geography of where the economy is key. That's why it's political economy, not just economy. There's a political encompassment to what we're talking about here. Netanyahu does not shy away from announcing at the UN podium, this is less than a month before October 7th, that there is no Palestine, there will never be a Palestine. And if you can see Israel there, the dark blue, it covers the entire region from the river to the sea. No wonder the Palestinians use that phrase. It's exactly what's in Netanyahu's party's platform, which is one Israel from the river to the sea. I'll share the slide deck with you so you can see these later, but these are some of the questions I get up front is, okay, why did America allow this to develop this much? And these 4 books are powerful documents of why we got to where we are. And again, I don't want to dwell on the history, but I just touch on the different phases of our history. If we talk about pre-1948, Palestine was an organic, economically speaking, and socially speaking, an organic part of the region. These are 2 books that one by a Palestinian professor and one by a Jewish Canadian professor, which depict that rather well. In the pre-1948 period, I can also look at a new book that was released just about 2 months ago by attorney Sabri Gideus and excellently translated by his daughter Fida Gideus, which is The Foundations of Zionism. In these books here and in hers, you will find that the issue of controlling the economy through controlling Palestinian labor or prohibiting Palestinian labor to participate in the establishment of Israel was part and parcel of the Zionist plans before the state was even announced. And then when 1948 happened, we hit shock and fragmentation. shocked because we were an agricultural community mainly, getting hit by a mechanized force which Palestinians had no chance to defend themselves against. And that shock lasted for a period of time. Ilan Pape, many of you have read this, has covered this area, this phase amazingly well documented from Israeli documents themselves that, by the way, have since been reclassified. And Fida Jirius, the person who translated her father's book, she wrote her own book as well, talks about this entire period that Palestinians who remained in Israel were put under military rule, a prelude to the occupation, which is exactly what happened in 1967. The Palestinians in Israel had their military rule stopped, and the system of their military rule was transferred to the occupied territory, as we know today, and that lasted for 1967 to 1993. Two good books that cover that period. And then we have from 1994, which when I went to Palestine, when I relocated to Palestine, until today. Actually, I say this and I wrote this long before October 7th, but it's exactly what's happening. Apartheid, annexation, and annihilation, as we're seeing in Gaza. And again, books that make the case. From an economic perspective, again, looking at this in a political history context, I always like to start with the pre-1948 area, and that chart on the left is a train schedule. And if you recall, the Zionists were saying that this was a land with no people for a people with no land. Well, that's a lot of places that people went. I mean, those non-people went. Of course, there were people there. That's a picture of Bethlehem on the right. And there were trains in and out from all around the region. Palestine had a life prior to 1948. Economically speaking, as I noted, it was an agricultural-based community, whether it was cotton, which no longer exists in Palestine, oranges or others. And that article in the middle is a clip from a Haaretz article that Zahi Khouri, a Palestinian businessman, wrote, talking about how his father sat on a board of a company they owned in 1923, which had Palestinian Christians, Muslims, and Jews all on the same board. So there was an economic alignment of interests prior to 1948. When 1948 happened, sadly, we went to a refugee status. And these are pictures of Palestinians heading out to their refugeedom. In the bottom right there, hard to understand this picture looking at what we're seeing today, that Palestinians in a newly fresh refugee status create a school on the rocks. And in 1966, on the left bottom there, they found some kind of quisling to actually sign off that the military rule of Palestinians who remained in Israel was ending before it transferred into the West Bank. I want to focus on that school for a second, because if we look at today, we see these kinds of pictures. Education being sought after in horrendous conditions. And these are, this is the resilience, basically, of the Palestinian community. If we go to 1967, when the occupation started, we have a attempt to normalize the occupation. And that is being done by giving Palestinians labor opportunities, whether it's in settlements, like the bottom right there, doing the hard work of the settlements, or agriculture, or light manufacturing in the middle there, or even giving Palestinian opportunities in the West Bank. These are sweatshops that were created to be able to serve the Israeli economy. Again, it was a design for Palestinians to become part and parcel of Israeli economic development. If I move forward to 1994 until today, you have a modernization of the economy. This is the period that I lived in. And you can see that the economy started taking on a rather Western, if I can say, connotation. Palestinian private sector came from abroad and invested in Palestine. Everything from that company on the left there on top, Unipal, the distribution company for many brands that we know, like Procter & Gamble and Philip Morris and others, to PALTEL, the company that runs the telecom network. That's what I went back to create. That was the employee 001 in that company. And all the way down to the bottom right there, where you have software companies and manufacturing plants, a proper attempt under occupation to develop an economy. Those of you that have been to Palestine may have come across those magazines that are in the middle there. That's a monthly magazine. It's called This Week in Palestine, as if we need more complication, but there's a story behind it. And they have one of the best edited English magazines that come out online as well. I encourage you to subscribe to it, but you can also download it for free online. And these two editions talk about the economy per se. Again, I don't have to go through the details here. This audience knows this information, but I just want to point to number three, which is the GDP of Palestine is around $11 billion. Israel's is over $520 billion. So not only are we dependent on Israel, Israel makes a tremendously more amount of production than we do. We're only 3.4% of what the Israeli GDP is, and we're only about 5% of what the GDP per capita is. Average Palestinian before the war, before the genocide, was making around $2,000. The Israelis were making a little bit over $50,000. The state of affairs in the various areas are clear. East Jerusalem illegally annexed in 1980, and there was a Security Council resolution, a binding Security Council resolution that the U.S. abstained to allow it to pass. And then fast forward to Donald Trump, first term, they moved their embassy there. The West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza, 57, now 58 years of military occupation. What I call the new Palestine is the Palestine of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip and East Jerusalem, the one that the Palestinians have conceded to accept in lieu of trying to make peace with the Israeli state, started in November 29, 2012. And Gaza was under 16 years of siege prior to what we now know is, as the ICC has mentioned, is a plausible genocide. Interestingly, Israel does not recognize any of the above statuses. They have one status. It's Israel from the river to the sea. Economic sectors in Palestine are not too many, but there are some solid ones. Tourism will always be a solid one. Not because we're geniuses in tourism, but because a few prophets decided to die here, and so we're stuck with them forever. So we're building a tourism sector around them, but tourism requires stability, and we haven't seen a proper phase of stability to actually excel in our tourism sector. Services, after the Oslo Accords, services boomed, and our economy, like many small economies around the world, started moving away from agriculture and towards services. And there's a reason why that as well, which is the agriculture. It has always been a strong component of our economy, but agriculture is what? Land and water. And those two things, amongst others, are fully controlled by Israel. So Israel was able to move our agriculture from 12% of our GDP today down to less than 2%. Financial, banking, insurance, microfinance is a thriving sector in Palestine. I was on a board of a large bank for about 20 years, so I can tell you a little bit about the banking sector. It is fully compliant with the global banking sector. ICT sector, and this is also close to my heart as I was part of building the telecom company. And as the restrictions on the ground become harder and harder and more, the community, the younger communities are moving towards information technology to get around that. The best community who was in our ICT sector was the Gazan community. They excelled in using ICT. It was the only way that they connect to the outside world. So no wonder the 5 major universities in Gaza were the first to be destroyed when the genocide started. There's a little bit of light industry, not much. A lot of the dirty industry from Israel is allowed to be done in the West Bank, such as plastics manufacturing, paint manufacturing. These are kinds of things that Israel doesn't want to produce on their side of the border, so they allow us to create it and they buy the finished product. And then we're building a country, so construction, building materials, and energy will always be big sectors, and even more so now that we have to rebuild Gaza. Won't go through this in detail, but there's many layers of laws that apply to us. The one that matters most from an Israeli perspective is the Israeli military orders. They basically say, we don't care what laws you have in place. Any military order that we issue, and there's thousands of them, and they cover every single thing you can think about, that overrides everything. I don't stop there. I add the Fourth Geneva Convention, the Hague Regulations, UN resolutions, because I understand Israel is not in the wild, wild east. They have a duty or obligation or responsibility to follow international law. Saying that today is a little bit of a joke given what we're seeing around the world. We're forced to use the Israeli currency. That's a picture from Gaza. Gaza is stuck because Israel will not exchange their own currency. Those are Israeli shekels. So the Palestinians have set up kiosks like this, trying to fix people's currencies to make them usable. This issue of Israel not taking their own currency and exchanging and depositing it for us has caused our banking system to have a surplus that's probably close to $5 billion today, sitting in our banks, incurring charges that we're not able to lend out, and it's a way to strangulate the economy. We also use the Jordanian dinar and the euro as well. Labor is a big issue. Israel built a $2.1 billion wall between them and us, not on the green line, but it encroaches inside of the occupied territory. The Palestinians invested in a $5 ladder to get around that 2.1 billion wall. And there has been, up until October 7th, about 200,000 workers that go into Israel. 150 or so get permits from the Israelis to go in, and about 50,000 have to do this because they can't get a permit. They just buy a ladder and walk over the wall. Today, that has dropped, it went to zero, and now it's come back up to about 20, 30,000. It's not because Israel's doing us a favor. It's because they need our labor in construction, their construction industry, and their agriculture industry. And if you look at prior to October 7th, Israel was benefiting to the tune of about $5 billion a year from our military occupation. So no wonder it didn't end. There's a high economic incentive. Many Israeli businesses make good money off of this captive audience called the Palestinians. Another reason why the occupation doesn't end, but it's one that's hidden because people don't speak about the economic side too much. A couple of slides just to put it all together. Palestine's economy has been hijacked. Above ground, we know that the settlements, as I spoke about, are natural resources like the gas in the Sea of Gaza, the quarries in the West Bank. We have some of the best marble that comes out of our quarries. House demolitions are at an all-time high. When we say a settlement, it's not only a settlement. I mean, a settlement is like a city, as you can see there in the picture. But it's the settlement network, the settlement access to water, the settlement connecting each of them together. It's a whole process. It's a land grab, exponentially. And I put one graph there on the bottom, just to show that when international law is respected, it works. During the Obama period, there was a resolution that was passed, Security Council Resolution 2334, and that was in 2016. If you notice, house demolitions were on the rise. When the resolution took place, immediately it dropped. Israel knows that there's a cost to be paid if the international community starts to apply international law. When the international community then turned a blind eye and Obama went out of office, then the construction came back up to highs. Underground, our water is a key aspect of this conflict. This is a photo, a graphic from 2019, and you can see that the distribution of water is tremendously skewed into the favor of the Israeli settler. And this today is even worse. In the Gaza Strip, it's not 90 liters. It's probably a liter or two if they have luck to get access to it. And then there's an economic stranglehold in terms of imports and exports. We import about 70% of our economy, and 54% of that comes from Israel. They make it easy for us to import from Israel. They make it hard for us to import from the global community because they put so many barriers. It's a way to protect their own industries as well. Same in terms of exports. We export about 20% of our economy. 88% of that goes to Israel. These trucks are waiting to cross a Israeli checkpoint. Also, we need to note the informal economy, the economy which doesn't show up in these numbers that are collected from the World Bank and others, is probably as large or larger than the formal economy. And that's why when you go to Palestine, you don't see run-down areas as much as you see a normal society working. That informal economy is one of the reasons why. I won't go through this in detail, but the case in point is the case that brought me to Palestine, which is the telecom sector. Oslo, the Accords, said that we would be allowed to build separate and independent communication networks. They're not separate, they're not independent. 30 years later, why? Israel controls the frequencies, Israel controls the connectivity, Israel controls the flow of human resources, and most importantly, not only for telecom, but for everything, Israel controls our imports. And basically, with Oslo, nothing changed. Israel applies custom fees to us. We pay our custom fees to the Israeli Port Authority. They collect those, they're supposed to collect those monies every month and transfer them to the Palestinian side, deducting 3%, which is a huge amount of money for handling fees. And more recently, they've just stopped Palestinians their money. Why is that important? Custom fees comprise about 70% of the Palestinian operating budget. So Israel has a stranglehold on the budget of the Palestinian Authority. They use standards. They say because you're using our ports, you have to follow Israeli standards, which are modern high-level standards, more than we can afford. They say we don't care. You're going to pay them anyway. And then security. There's a case that I'm aware of. I mean, security is something we can say, but we don't exactly know how to explain. Materials, equipment comes to the port. The same exact equipment that's going to Israel gets held up, passes and goes to Israel in about 2 weeks. Same exact equipment stays at the port for 2 years while it's getting security checked before it comes to the Palestinian side. That's a live case. And this is basically Gaza that I will remember. That's gone. It's not there anymore. It's a lively, colorful place. Poor, yes. Refugees, yes. But one of the warmest people you'll find on earth. This is it today. I can't get my mind around what has happened. I'll do these talks because these are kids from Gaza. I don't know where they are today, but they deserve better than this. They could be here trying to get food because there is a famine that has started again now in Gaza. But let's not only focus on Gaza. I'll end by noting Jenin. Jenin has been attacked for over a decade now in the same kind of mindset of destruction. This was in 2002, long before October 27th, 2023, where Israelis brought tanks into the refugee camp in Jenin and just started clearing out homes. And if you read the Guardian article, they had with an interview with the Israeli tank caterpillar driver, and he was joking and saying, "Why are the Palestinians so pissed off? We just basically opened up a new football field for them in the middle of the camp." Very sick minds. This is July 2023 in Jenin. Same kind of things that they have been doing across the West Bank, which is now they bring in their bulldozers and uproot the infrastructure of the camp, the street, the water, the gas, etc., doing serious economic damage to get Palestinians to either despair or leave or turn violent. And they have removed over 40,000 Palestinians. They did this in February 2025, and they are still not home. About 40,000 Palestinians from their homes in the West Bank. Under the guise of everybody's eyes is on Gaza, the West Bank is being what we call Gazified. Again, these are kids from Jenin. They deserve better. And I'll end just by noting, where are we going with all of this? And I assume many of you have seen this. You'll find it on my blog, epalestine.ps. This is one of the latest reports from Francesca Albanese, who basically talks about Israel's economy moving from an economy of occupation to an economy of genocide. But it's not only about Israel. She very accurately discusses how this is a global system serving Israel's purpose of genocide. And that's where we all have a role to play, because these are companies that we know, we work with, we use their services, or we're shareholders from, and that's where we should be able to make a stink. And that's my blog that you can see all this stuff at, and I'll be more than happy to answer questions. Sorry for speaking so fast, but they said they wanted to get to a conversation, so I'm here.
Thank you so much, Sam. As usual, if anybody wants to ask any questions, you're welcome to raise your hand or put your question in the chat, and yeah, we can get to it. And the economic aspect, it's with so much other carnage and massacre going on, it's almost like that part of it almost gets ignored, because when you're constantly just fighting for life and death, then you're not, but that's, even when that's happening, the economic disparity and the economic terrorism really is still constantly there. And
Absolutely.
we
We're seeing that in Iran as well. I mean, once the bullets stop and the dust rests, what we will find is that the economic constraints remain in place, but nobody looks at them because they think things are over. Iranians are using the Strait of Hormuz to make an economic gesture to fight back against what was an illegal war against them. They have the Strait of Hormuz. We don't have that kind of leverage. So when the issue goes off the headlines, the economic structure, because it is a structure, and that's what Francesca Albanese's report clearly explains. It is a structure of dominance, a structure of dependency. So when everything else gets off the headlines, that doesn't budge. That has been entrenched for decades and decades, and Israel's benefiting financially from it, so they have no incentive to do anything otherwise. So yes, it does go off the headlines, but it's there, and it's something that we can address, and it's economic. So it pinches in the pocket, and that's where people, I hope, average Israelis will wake up when they start seeing that there's a price to pay for their government's illegalities.
Yeah. We actually, about a year and a bit ago, we had one of the two Israeli professors who declared what's happening in Gaza genocide, um, and he said, like, that at that time, a year and a bit ago, the Israelis are not feeling an economic pinch from the war. The war is not really costing them too much. They've lost 40, 50, 60 soldiers, something like that. But other than that, they're not feeling the pinch in the grocery stores or anything like that. Anyways, Karina has a question, and
Yeah.
I also had a related question, so I'll ask both at the same time. I remember when the wall was being built, I remember that Israel was using Palestinian laborers themselves to build the walls. And so I'll ask Karina's question first, and then I'll ask my question. Do Palestinians end up as labor to build the settlements in the West Bank?
Sadly, yes. Why? Palestinians become desperate. Israel closes labor, controls who gets a permit and not, destroys homes at unprecedented rates, makes sure that we cannot import freely, and then says, come work here. We'll give you a better salary than your own community gives you. They don't give the Palestinian community the opportunity to build options for these laborers. So although I hate that they work in the settlements, I can't blame them as individuals, because it's a game that's stacked against them. And if the boot of occupation would come off of our neck, we can absorb all of the labor that goes into Israel. We're building a country. We need everything. But if we're not able to have investments and proper community development, those laborers are left on their own. And on their own, they'll go wherever their work is, even if they have to walk up a wall with a ladder and go illegally in Israel to work. So it's key that we understand that the constraints that Israel puts on our communities is a factor that gets those laborers to choose to go into the Israeli settlements.
Yeah.
One note I would say, some of something you said prior. That's why I noted that they made prior to the war, I said, about $5 billion a year off of our economy. 5 billion. Our gas comes from them. Our petroleum comes from them. Our water comes from them. So they make a significant up until October 7th. At October 7th onward, there is a cost that they have started to pay, and it's not only in humans being killed, soldiers or otherwise. It is an economic cost, and it's also an exiting cost. Many Israelis are voting with their feet by leaving Israel. There was an Israeli poll that came out recently, and they say anywhere between 400,000 to 500,000 people have exited Israel, with 100,000 of them not coming back. They stated they're not coming back. And if you know how Israel is created, it's created by immigration. If people don't come to Israel from abroad, it fails as a model. And they're very worried about that now. And I believe Israelis will be back in the streets, because when they start to see that businesses are hurting, the reserve duty is taking much, much longer than they expected, which means companies are hurting, families are being torn apart, above and beyond the human cost that this is costing, and the moral cost as well. When you send your 18-year-old to Gaza to do genocide, he doesn't come back the same boy or girl in his community and live a nice, happy life. So you're going to see domestic violence in Israel rise, et cetera, et cetera. So this is taking, for the first time ever, a serious and deep toll on the Israeli society. We hope it wakes them up. Until now, it hasn't.
Right. And they've been, literally taking advantage of desperate Palestinians for decades. Tom has a question. Tom, please.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I was talking to a friend in Ramallah, who lives in Ramallah, and he was saying that we were talking about BDS, and he told me that, much to his dismay, the stores in Ramallah are filled with like Israeli products, and oftentimes there will be an Israeli alternative sitting right next to a Palestinian alternative, and people will still buy the Israeli product. And I was just wondering, like, what are your thoughts about that? About, like, whether BDS. I mean, obviously, it's easy for us in the West to do BDS, but like, how do is there any promotion of BDS as an idea, like, within Palestine? Or?
Yes, there is. Actually, there was long before the BDS movement came about as well. But it's very, very difficult, as you noted, to implement it on the ground. When I say that we are structurally dependent on Israel, that's at all levels, including the grocery store, including people's mindset regarding quality. What's a quality product and what's not? I'll give you an example of something that happened that I tried to change that example you gave of the grocery store. When I got to Palestine, one of the things I did after I left PALTEL, the telecom company, was to create something called the Plaza Shopping Center. In that shopping center, there was a supermarket chain that we established called the Bravo supermarket chain. And there we took an administrative decision: 3 things. Absolutely no settlement products in the store. Israeli products only where needed, and they are needed in some categories, and promotion of Palestinian products at all the places that you promote in the store, like end shelves and so forth. So although I don't think we can completely detach ourselves from Israeli products, settlement products, yes, from all Israeli products, but more and more, and this is a resilience of the private sector, the more and more the Palestinian private sector is able to produce alternatives, the more we can convince store owners to reduce or exit the Israeli products. Having said that, there should be no settlement product in any store, no matter what. Those are illegal products, and we can't be asking the global community not to deal in settlement products if we are. And it's a taboo. I mean, people try not to do it. and I would hope more and more don't do it. But we can be a settlement-free area. I'm not sure we can be an Israeli-free area because Israel controls how much we can develop our production capacities.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Since you're an ICT expert, actually, I would really love to ask you this as well. Why? So for 2.5 years, we've been watching this live stream genocide in Gaza. Like, why did the Israelis allow that? Why didn't they just cut the internet in Gaza like on day one?
Okay, first, I'm not an expert in anything, as my wife reminds me frequently. That's a good question. And having worked in telecom, I think I have a convincing answer. And this is over a period of time, not only with October 7th, but over 2 intifadas, et cetera, et cetera. We are the most surveilled community on earth, period. And part of that surveillance is signals surveillance by a unit in the IDF called Unit 8200. They get a tremendous amount of information from keeping the telecommunication system operating. It doesn't mean they allow it to thrive. For example, and I'm talking before October 7th, it took us 10 years after 4G was released to get the Israelis to release 4G in the West Bank. They refused to allow 3G, not 4G. And they refused to allow 3G in Gaza until now. Gaza still operates under a 2G network. In the West Bank, we can't get them to agree to give us 4G, let alone 5G, as I'm hearing is already out and working. So Israel controls the quality of our communication network, but they have an interest in making sure that they have an ear in all of our society. The newspaper or news site 972 came out with Local Call, which is an Israeli news site with a joint investigation, and they talk about that surveillance. And an interesting thing, they interviewed someone who worked in this environment in Israel, and he said, we have 100 million words captured in our databases from Palestinian to Palestinian communication. 100 million, what the hell? And he says, some things are mundane. I mean, when the father stops at the school to pick up his daughter and he calls her and says, I'm outside waiting in the car, you would think that's not important. For us, it's a gem because it's the language that they use, it's the tone that they use, it's the dialect that they use, and we collect all of that. And we saw that in action in Gaza because they were able to actually use two systems that they put together. One was called Lavender, and the other was called Daddy's Home, or Where's Daddy? Unbelievable name. Lavender basically picked targets with AI fast enough to be able to make the amount of damage that we're seeing. And people who are coming out of this Israeli environment are saying human intervention was like 2 seconds per target. There was no actual due diligence if that should be a target or not, and how much collateral damage was going to be done. The second system they created was also an AI system called Daddy's Home, or Where's Daddy? I forget the name exactly. And that one was basically waiting to any Hamas operative, not leadership, operative. The kitchen guy, the guy who makes them food, for example, is an operative. Until he was home or she was home with his family, they would bomb the house to make sure they killed the entire family, disregarding any kind of collateral damage that would happen, like the rest of the building that they were living in. So they've used AI. A lot of it is based on your original question, which is on signals capturing from the Palestinian community over decades. So it's a tool. It's a tool in their toolbox.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I help run Tech for Palestine. We do a lot of coverage on these topics, but that one just has mystified me all along, like why they even allowed it. But yeah, that does make a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you.
A security need. It's like some people say, why do they allow Palestinian laborers to go into Israel? It's an economic need. If they didn't have a need for their own economic development to tap Palestinian labor in construction and in agriculture mainly, they wouldn't let them in. When they took it to zero after October 7th, they rushed to be able to get people in. There were reports coming out of the Israeli Manufacturing Association saying that the construction productivity dropped like double digits. I forget the exact number. They couldn't import workers from abroad who knew how to work with the materials that we use in our region to be able to build, like stone and marble and such as that. So they do things because they have a need to do it, basically.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Sure thing.
Question from Karina. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm not sure how to ask my question, but I'm just curious about, for example, you probably know Morgan Cooper, who does Handmade Palestine. And also within my same question, like the soaps that come out of Nablus from that soap factory. I guess it's hard for me to imagine how they're able to reliably deliver their products to the United States. And how do they do that if Israel can strangle at any moment? And I don't know how they affect, I don't know if you would call those cottage industries, but if you could just comment on that.
Yeah, that question comes up a lot. People think that we can't import and we can't export, but as I showed, we do import and export. A lot of it goes through to Israel or from Israel. And when I say Israel, it doesn't mean it sits in Israel. A lot of Israelis buy Palestinian products, and then as Israeli companies, re-export that out to the global world. But a lot of I know the companies you're talking about, many of them had to incur extra costs. For example, the soap factory in Nablus, if it's the same one I'm thinking about, they had to invest in storage facilities, warehouses in the US to be able to put a safety stock here. So when someone orders, they can actually get their product from the US instead of getting it from Palestine directly. Other olive oil companies, Cannon Free Trade, a lot of these companies have warehouses here or in the European Union area. It's an extra cost that they may not have to give, but everything is occupied. Our ports, our mailing system. At one point, there was a UPI article that talked about Israel hoarding, I think it was 3 years of our mail, and then dumping it one day on the Palestinians because they ran out of storage space. And I used to joke in my talks, if you sent me a Christmas card and I didn't reply, it's because Israel held it for 3 years. So they're able to disrupt any kind of venue we have to the outside world. And it's all controlled, but even if it's controlled, sometimes things do get out.
So
remember when we send things out, Karina, they're benefiting. It's their checkpoints that we have to cross. It's their trucking systems that we have to cross. It's their ports that we export from. It's their custom agencies that have to clear. So they're part and parcel of any business that we do, whether we like it or not.
So would we know, for example, if the soap company was selling the soap to Israel and Israel was turning around and selling it to the international market, would we as the consumer be able to know that from a
I'm not
BDS?
sure. That example specifically is not the case. They have their own warehouses directly, so they ship bulk to their warehouses, as I understand. I'll give you one that doesn't. For example, stone and marble, which is a very heavy item physically, but also it's the biggest sector in Palestine. They are selling raw stone that comes out, cut stone, to the Israeli producers who actually cut the marble out of the stone and sell it in the global market. Many of the times marketing is made in Israel. And that's damaging because that's a big ticketed item. We can benefit much better if we had a direct connection to the world to be able to sell stone and marble, which is our biggest sector. Israelis benefit highly. That actually went to the High Court in Israel. Palestinian, through an Israeli human rights organization, Yesh Din, took it to the High Court and said, the Israeli High Court, Israeli trucks cannot come in and physically take the land. And the High Court decided in Israel they can. And that was a clear indication about 10 years ago that they had no intention whatsoever to respect any kind of international law. So you'll find not only do they come and cut the stone out of the mountain and take it to Israel for processing, but those few Palestinian quarries that do operate end up just selling the raw material to Israel because they can't afford to do anything more with it. And the value is in the more. It's in cutting and shining and polishing and so forth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
You're
Karina.
welcome.
You know, one question that I've always had is, you know, like I have little children. If they were starving, I would go work in a settlement to make money to feed them, right? Do you ever talk to the people who are working in the settlements, maybe the people who built the apartheid wall or others, to see like what their mindset is? Like, how do they feel after doing those kinds of work? Do they try to find other options? How does that kind of work out?
Yeah, the ones I know, the ones I speak to are furious with themselves, but they have no other option. It becomes a financial calculation for them. And even if there are opportunities in the West Bank, in Palestinian opportunities, they look at the financial gain of working in Israel or in a settlement. And you know, these people are desperate. They are literally desperate, and their life depends on day work. So if you don't work today, you don't feed your kids tonight. So they take whatever they can get at the moment. They don't have a big national calculation. They did at one point, but as the Palestinian Authority became weaker and weaker, there's no national guiding light to get people mobilized around a plan of action. So people feel the last 10 years that they're out on their own. And when you're on your own, you do what's best for your family. And that's a weakness of the Palestinian leadership, unable to mobilize in a way to get people rallying not to work in settlements, to resist the occupation smartly, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's constant economic terrorism that's inflicted on them.
And there's no blood, so it doesn't reach the headlines, so most people don't know about it.
Right. Is the average Israeli aware of how dependent they are on Palestinian labor? Like, it seems like a big kind of contradiction. Like, you know, there's so much hate, wild hatred of Palestinians amongst the Israelis, but at the same time, are they like not constantly seeing Palestinian laborers around them literally building their houses, literally picking their crops, things like that?
Yes, that's a great question. Israeli society, as we're seeing today, the result of it, has been indoctrinated at a level which history will write about. So although they see Palestinians in their neighborhood, in their houses, fixing, cleaning, picking, and so forth, they don't make the connection, as far as I can see, that this is something which has a joint interest to make sure the Palestinians are able to do that. When the Israelis twice tried to bring the number of laborers to zero, once when they built the wall, and secondly at October 7th, the first people who rose up in defiance of that were Israeli suppliers. They were like, you know, we're losing a business. We're losing out on the ability for this cheap labor that was coming in. And they were making a louder noise than the Palestinians themselves trying to get the labor to come back. You know, if you have a construction site and it's moving along with 100 Palestinian laborers and all of a sudden they can't get to work, you find that that site owner will become vocal, not because he sees human rights in Palestinians or even humanizes Palestinians. He just wants his site to come back to activity. So we have been dehumanized. We're seen as machines that do labor and not as a people seeking self-determination and dignity. And October 7th kind of revealed that in glory, you know, in colored. And until Israel can come off the ladder and start seeing Palestinians for who they are as equals, Israel will continue to dig a very deep hole for itself.
Yeah. Oh, my daughter just decided to join us.
Hi.
बाबा की मीटिंग है। अब मैं आपसे बाद में बात करूँगा। मैं हाँ ठीक मैं आपसे बाद में बात करूँगा। जी मैं आपसे बाद में बात करूँगा। Okay. All right. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. Karina, you're asking about brain drain.
सबको hi बोलो.
It is affecting the reports that I read a lot of Israeli media, and it's clearly affecting the businesses in Israel. There's something like 65,000 businesses have closed since October 7th. So definitely, but it's also affecting because the reservists, the Israeli army is based mainly on reservists that are supposed to spend, I think, a month a year serving in the army as a reservist. And these people have been now engaged for almost 3 years, off and on for months at a time. So it's destroying not only their businesses, but their families as well. They've missed birthdays and bar mitzvahs and so forth. So it's creating a tear in the Israeli society. But I should note as well, it's also affecting us as Palestinians. People in Palestine also don't only go work in settlements, but those that can find an opportunity abroad, try to get abroad. And that's damning for Palestinians because that's exactly what the Israeli strategy is, to get Palestinians frustrated enough that they leave or turn violent. I mean, Smotrich actually he has a plan. It's called a decisive plan. He put it out before he was elected or before he was appointed finance minister. And his plan is a very couple-page plan, which basically says Palestinians have 3 options. Basically, work for us and stop talking about politics because you're never going to have any national rights. Leave, and that would be our preferred option, or turn violent, and we know how to deal with that. So they have very clearly and publicly stated the intent to get Palestinians to turn violent, and people do, or to leave, and people are. And people are working, but they're not forgetting their national rights. That's where they will fail because the Palestinian community has been through a lot. Although this period of time has seen a tremendous amount of war crimes happen, they're not new to us. What is new to us is the acceleration of house demolitions, of bombings, of arrests, of torture. All those elements and many, many more are things that we have been living with for decades. Whoever woke up on October 8th and felt the world after October 7th was a disaster wasn't reading, wasn't aware of what we've been through as Palestinians. Now, more and more are learning the history. Better late than never, I guess. But October 7th comes in a context. It doesn't come out of the blue. People don't wake up one day in the morning and say, hey, let's go kill people. That's not normal. There is a context that Israelis are indoctrinated not to see. More and more are seeing, and especially more and more Jewish Americans are seeing and organizing themselves to make the case that this occupation has to end, and the occupation mainly, in addition to the creation of Israel itself, the wrongs that were done there, which were never corrected, are the source of why October 7th came about.
Right. Karina has a question. Is the brain drain really affecting the Israeli economy? A lot of experts I follow talk about everything collapsing, but yesterday I heard an Israeli say everything is fine in Israel. Hard to know what's really going on.
As I noted, they are being affected. Their economy, they have a big blackout right now. Not only is there a media blackout, media is not able to report on what's happening on the ground in Israel. It has to go through an Israeli military censor. And as you see from alternative media, even places that Iran hit with missiles are not able to be reported on. Even worse than that, in my opinion, 2.5 years of a genocide, international media is still not allowed to go into the Gaza Strip. What are they hiding? What are they hiding? They're hiding war crimes. They're trying to cover up war crimes. The entire occupied territory, Gaza, West Bank, East Jerusalem included, is a crime scene. It should be roped off, and international investigators should come in and start holding people accountable. As long as we have this kind of US and this kind of a leadership in the US, there's a domination in the international global arena that won't let that happen. But the global South is moving in the right direction. Some countries are taking aggressive steps, like Spain, like Ireland, and others. People are starting to sanction Israel. People are starting to say, we don't want a military relationship with you. If you're bombing Iran illegally, if you're undertaking a genocide, if your prime minister is wanted at The Hague, we don't want anything to do with you.
Right.
Karina asked if I receive threats. I don't. I mean, every once in a while I'll get an email, but nothing to worry about. And I come from the school of thought that the squeaky wheel is my protection. As long as I keep speaking out, and knowing that I have audiences like you to back me up if something goes wrong, they'd rather take somebody out who's quieter.
If you can spare just a couple extra minutes,
Yeah, sure.
one question, if you're able to answer, if not, that's okay, is, like just the constant ineptitude of the Palestinian Authority, like, and do you face any censorship from Palestinian Authority? And what, like, we know that they're useless. They're worse than useless because they are constantly collaborating with the Israelis as well, allowing them to do whatever they want to do. What is the average Palestinians view from West Bank, from Gaza, regarding the Palestinian Authority?
I do not receive any threats from them, although they've put out a statement or two criticizing what I've written and so forth. I'm very vocal about my opinions, especially about internal Palestinian politics and the lack of elections and so forth, but nothing in terms of threats. The Palestinian Authority is a tough nut to crack because they are under military occupation, just like everyone else. If you and I were the head of the Palestinian Authority, we would probably not be able to do much better. Because if you're the head of the Palestinian Authority, you have two options. One is to say, I will not deal with my occupier, I'm closing my door. And the Israelis say, okay, no permits, no exit to Jordan to travel, no water, no petroleum, no telecommunication. They can say all of these things, and you're sitting there with a very moral, correct position, but a collapsed society. Or you start to deal with Israel on an as need be basis, and that's what I would do if I was in their position. They've taken one step further. They've kind of embraced the US and Israel together and tried to be the best example they can be on what Israel and the US want. That's a step too far, and that's what's making them lose credibility. They can deal with, I don't have a problem because I know that they're under occupation. I know they have to deal with the occupation to get society remain moving. But that doesn't mean I have to do security cooperation. It doesn't mean I have to arrest people that Israel wants me to arrest for them. It doesn't mean I don't make requests on the international scene because Israel threatens me or the US threatens me. The Palestinian Authority, the PLO specifically, has made some progress in that arena. They went to the UN looking for recognition for membership in the UN. They've gone to other states looking for recognition from other countries. And that's something Israel is against, but they've gone anyway. And more recently, Israel has done what I just said it would do. They started not transferring the custom fees. Okay, you want to go and ask the world to recognize you? We're not going to give you your custom fees, so you can collapse financially. We're not going to deposit your $5 billion of shekels in your banks. So we're just going to have your banks collapse. So Israel is punishing in a punitive way, in a collective way, any act that the Palestinian Authority takes. That's why civil society is important, because civil society can pick up where the PA can't possibly be in the front. Civil society can pick up, but that requires the PA not to attack civil society, which they have. And again, that's the step too far that I think they've taken.
Maybe if you can spare a couple more minutes, just last two questions.
Sure.
Question from Dal. But can't the PA at least do basic defense of its people when under direct attack in zones that they have more authority? And then we'll take another last question from Tom after that.
They could. Let me put it differently. As per the agreements that they signed, they can't. They're not allowed. They could bypass those agreements because Israel has destroyed every agreement they signed. But that would be a red carpet for Israel to attack viciously, like they're doing now everywhere, and use it as an excuse that the Palestinians provoked. What the Palestinians have are light arms. They're not going to be able to face this nuclear power in any kind of serious way. Where they should allow civil society to mobilize is to fend off the settlers who are attacking the villages. The Palestinian Authority does not allow Palestinian civil society to act in any kind of defensive manner. They should be able to kind of balance between what they can do as a formal authority in front of the Israelis and what they allow to happen in their society, like giving civil society some breathing room to be able to face these settlers. But remember, the settlers are armed. They're backed by the IDF. So we're facing a state. A tiny community of Bedouins in South Hebron Hills are facing a state violence against them. So it sounds, when you're far away, it sounds logical that you have a gun, shoot, but there's much more to facing off people violently than just shooting a gun. You have to feed your people the next day. You need access to water the next day. You need healthcare the next day, et cetera, et cetera.
And so, like basically they're kind of like stuck in between a hard place and a rock, and so.
But they're resilient. They're resilient, and that's why what Karina asked before, the resilience of us being able to produce, or I think maybe Tom was asking, to be able to produce products to compete with Israeli products, even though we're under occupation. For our students to be able to cross 3-4 checkpoints to get to school to get a graduate degree or to get a university degree. All of that is what we can do without repercussions directly from the Israeli military, and we're doing it. If you ask me, is there anything we're not doing that we can do? I would say it's very, very little. Palestinians have found everywhere possible to sustain life as much as possible without getting hit back to a point where everybody's Gaza at the end of the day.
Right. And we'll take one last question from Tom, and then Tom, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so just real quickly, one thing, I tend to connect on LinkedIn with pretty much anybody Palestinian or pro-Palestinian, and as a result, I have like a number of connections with people who are in the PA, and I just wonder, like, as an outside advocate, like, does that give like a bad impression to other Palestinians that I would like be connected with people in the PA, because I know there's a lot of bad blood there?
I don't believe that exists in our society. Remember, you have about a good 200,000 people who are working for the Palestinian Authority and their families. That's a million people within this small tiny community that have a vested interest with the Palestinian Authority. Inside Palestine, the Palestinian Authority may be criticized, but it doesn't go as far as some of the people outside of the country are putting it in the same bucket as Israel itself. Remember, our healthcare, they're taking care, they're dealing with our healthcare, with our education system, with our municipal governments. So they do have a value. It doesn't match the value that we think it could have, and it's not at the national level of mobilizing against the occupation that we would like to see, but there's a lot below that they do undertake. So there's no negative ramifications of having connections with the Palestinian Authority officials.
Okay, cool.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. I mean, I can be connected at any time on LinkedIn or epalestine.ps. All my contact information is there. I will respond. I'll get back to you, as Karina can attest. I don't miss an email. So anything I can do to help, please let me know.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for connecting with us and enlightening us on so many different aspects of Palestinian life. And
thanks a lot.
I appreciate all the rest of you for joining today as well. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.